Welcome everyone to another episode of Bruvcast. I'm Raj.
I'm Mick.
Bruv, we have a very special guest today, man.
Very talented guest.
Yeah, it's our first artiste, bruv. First one, right? We haven't had an artist. I mean, we've had like people who perform, and obviously we had Tez, and we've had Homie's Kitchen who does like culinary things. But we have an artist, someone who creates art. So I don't even know how best to introduce him, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So we have reached out and connected with an artist who's been on the scene for a couple of years now. All started off during the pandemic, and creation of prints that really kind of connect cultures of India, Kenya, and the UK in very, very interesting kind of mashups. You will definitely have heard the name when I say it, and maybe you even have some of the prints yourselves. So yeah, it's such a pleasure. I'm super excited for this conversation, and I'd like to welcome Bhavin from ЩU CHヂ ART to the podcast. Welcome, Bhavin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk to you about a few different things on the podcast.
Yeah, and I hope my intro did justice to everything that you do.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. I did start in the lockdowns in 2020, and it doesn't actually seem that long ago, but the time has gone really quickly. And before I know it, I've been doing this 3 years and counting. So yeah, it's good, and I'm kind of enjoying it. But it always still feels new, because there's always, the to-do list keeps getting bigger rather than shorter. So you never feel like you're actually on top of things fully.
Do you feel like you're now established? Do you feel established in yourself that this is your kind of like full thing and you're like completely comfortable in it, or do you still feel like you're learning about bits that like are there things that still you find overwhelming about it?
I think so. I came from like a long-ish teaching career. I was a teacher for 18 years, and I love that. I love that job, and I love the profession, and I love education as an idea. And but having been there for so long, I did every job I wanted to within the institution. So for the last place I worked was a sixth form, and I'd been there for a number of years. And in that time, I went from beginner teacher, really blagging it and like making stuff up and just being a page ahead of the students most of the time, to a really experienced teacher, and then to head a department and all of those things. And that was fun, because it got to a point where I was making decisions that would affect 10 other teachers and the technicians and about 300 students. And that was nice, because it felt like I could have some creative control and direction. But with education, it's very, very sort of cyclical, in that September, it starts in September, it ends in July, and you do it 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then you're like, okay, so we're just doing the same thing again and again and again, and eventually you run out of challenge. And so the lockdowns came along. I started drawing again, and sort of without me really planning it, this kind of idea turned into a business, and that's where the new challenges come in. Because if you've not had a business before, how are you supposed to know what to do? There's no manual for it. I mean, there probably is a manual for it, but not that I've read. And you sort of make it up as you go along, and you think you're doing all the right things, but at some point you've got to stop and reflect and ask others and get sort of mentors in place. And that's the kind of tricky bit, to kind of juggle all of those things. It's about, if, as a solo business owner, you're doing about 15 jobs easily on a daily. And then sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. So you're doing nobody's jobs. You're just sitting there with cups of tea and watching TV in the daytime. So it's been fun, but it's been challenging.
Yeah. So you said that you started off in teaching. Was there, like, when the pandemic hit and everything kind of, you discovered, well, you tapped back into, your art, and you started sketching and drawing. once things opened up, you could have gone back into teaching, right? What stopped you from doing that?
So I did have a plan to phase out the teaching, and I guess for 5 years before any of this happened, I was thinking, well, I'm a sort of creative through and through. I like lots of different things in terms of art and design, and for example, I love interior design, and I make furniture sometimes, and I love photography, and so I'm a bit of a creative jack of all trades. And I always thought there's got to be something else I can do other than just teaching, because teaching wasn't really the career I set out to have. But it came along, I tried it, and I loved it, and that's why I stuck with it for so long. But I originally trained in fine art, and when I trained in fine art, I didn't really have a clear idea of what I was going to do with it afterwards. But it ended up being super useful because I taught loads of different creative subjects. But I did have in the back of my mind, I wanted to stop doing this, or at least have a bit of a hybrid. So I'd become a part-time teacher, and then I'd try something else. But I never quite knew what that something else should be. And, like, we live in, I think we're London based, and you live in a city which is quite fast in terms of like things moving around you, but also if you stay still and if you take a back seat, or if you lose your job, or if you miss a couple of paychecks, the implications are huge, because we all have bills to pay and mortgages to pay. So there's always that fear of like starting something new, because what if it doesn't work, and what if you don't earn enough money, and what if you can't pay the bills? And I think we're getting quite deep here, but I think in our culture, there's a level of safety that people want. And I understand where it comes from, because our parents' generations were immigrants who worked damn hard to save enough money to buy property, to put their kids through education. And so within them is instilled this fear that, no, you've got to work, you have to have a full-time job, it must be permanent, you must have, promotions in the future. And there's nobody really thinks, actually, should we just take a year off and try something new and see what happens? Because the fear of the risk is too great for most people to do that. And that's sort of instilled in me as well, coming from a relatively sort of low-income family. And so when the pandemic happened, it was kind of just a happy coincidence for me that, because I found myself with all this time, I was like, right, I've got no excuse now, because I'm sitting at home for hours and no one's asking me to do much. So let's take out the iPad, let's take out some sketchbooks, let's get drawing. And that's kind of, it was a bit of a blessing. It was a horrible time, obviously, for everyone and the whole planet. But I think for me and a lot of people, that time was a bit of a pivotal moment. It changed people's lives, obviously for horrible reasons, but also a lot of people changed direction, started something new in that time. So in that sense, there was something good that came out of it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, COVID was crazy. I mean, I think the one thing that it forced everyone to do was slow down, because you could not operate at the speed that you were operating. Like, you couldn't, right? There's nothing you could do. You literally had to sit at home. So I think it made a lot of people restless, because after the first couple of weeks, it's fun. You can watch what you want. You're kind of doing your own thing in your own space. But then it's like, hold on, arguments are starting and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was alone the entire time. Like, I was all by myself.
Really?
I mean, that had its own issues, right? Like, got really lonely and stuff. But Mick, you had a slightly different situation, didn't you, bro?
Yeah, I know, man. Do you know my two were young at that time, so homeschooling and trying to work at the same time, and hey, it is what it is. Others had it much worse, right? So you can't, your family's happy and healthy, but at the same time, that had its challenges where you're trying to homeschool, and kids when they're young, they don't know that you're on a work call, or they're just going to barge in, and you're trying, but everyone knows the spiel with that. But no, yeah, it was a hard time. But you know what, Bhavin, I wanted to like ask you something. if you could take yourself back to the moment, yeah, where you found that consistency in lockdown, was it, did you, when you
Yeah.
realized, you were going to start drawing again, and creating again, take us back to that moment, if you could.
Do you know what? There is something else that sparked it,
Yeah, go
actually.
on.
A few months before that, so as well as being a teacher, I was also a moderator for UAL, University Arts London, and that means that I would go and check the coursework of other schools
Right.
and colleges
Sure.
to see if their teachers were marking things properly, all of that stuff. And so they have a conference a couple of times a year, and on this conference you had like 4 speakers on stage, and one of them was an artist, and she was talking, and it'd been a long day already, and it was kind of half listening, and after lunch everything slows down and people are just like, oh, when's it going to hit like 4 o'clock so we can sneak off to the pub around the corner, that sort of thing. And but she was talking, and something she said, like, it just resonated with me so much that I think maybe she's responsible for me changing what I've done. And what she said is, as an artist, she had this thought, which was, think back to, like, if you want to find your true passion, think back to what you used to love doing when you were like 10, 11 years old. Really think hard about what that was and go and do it. And that was like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, well, that's so obvious for me, because I was obsessed with making stuff. I would, we'd have a lot of money for toys and all of those things and experiences and holidays. And, we'd never go on a plane, all of that stuff. But I would, you give me cardboard, paper, scissors, crayons, or tips, and I would keep myself busy for the whole summer holidays, because I was constantly creating things and always drawing as well. And so I thought, actually, maybe she's onto something here. And that's when I kind of, I think I already had an iPad, but I got some software and stuff, and I started doing some digital drawing. And I thought, actually, this is giving me so much joy, that what if I share it? What if I put it online and see what people think? And then I was already approaching 40, I think, when that was happening. And I thought, well, I'm too damn old for like this Instagram malarkey, because it feels like a young space, doesn't it? And I think it's changed. I think because everyone's grown older with it. But when I got on it, I was like, what the hell is this? And I remember my sister-in-law helped me like promote a little bit with her friends, and then one weekend I got 100 followers.
Damn.
I was so boosted. I was like, whoa, I've got 100 people who want to see what I'm doing. And by that time, I had 3 pieces of artwork on there. And then from there, it just grew massively. And people like, there's a really nice community on Instagram of South Asian creatives, and not just creatives, but South Asian sort of makers, creators, entrepreneurs, and particularly also North Indian and Gujarati people. And it seemed like, because the work resonated with them, they were sharing it with everyone they knew. And when like some of the bigger accounts like Guju Memes started reposting and giving me shout outs and things, it just completely changed. It went from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands. And so that made me feel like, actually, there is I've hit on something that resonates with people, and I kind of owe it to myself and also like the people that are interested to carry on and really push it and keep making artwork. And the artwork, like on the surface, it looks very typically like a pop art piece which you'd find in like 1960s America, but like we can deconstruct some of the work, and for me there's layers and layers of meaning that really sort of, for me, they kind of connect to the immigrant experience, the second and third generation ones, and what people went through, and what our position is in the world now and in the UK now. So there's all of that as well. And I've got this idea that really I know this stuff, and a few people that read the descriptions know these things, but really I should be talking about it a bit more and kind of sharing a bit more of an insight into the work. So that's in the works for this year.
Cool. It's crazy
Yeah.
just to hear like how one person said a couple of words, right? Because that I mean, you break it down, that's what it is. A couple of words.
It's a sentence.
Yeah, and that just borrowed into your head, and then just kind of like silently guided you or nudged you, you know, towards this, which is crazy. Like, I if I think back to even us starting this, I don't have a very crystal clear moment where it was like, okay, yeah, it's ready to do this. I think Mick and I spoke about this like so many times. But like there was just one day where I was like, we're just gonna start recording. I just cornered him and just like started the microphone, and I was like, here we go. This is episode 1 is literally in my living room on my and it's just recorded on my phone.
But this is the thing. The hardest thing is starting sometimes, isn't it? Because you build it up so much in your head. But once you get out there, everyone's in the same boat, aren't they? Everyone's starting somewhere, and nobody's polished or perfect to begin with. And why should you be? You know, you want to be real as possible, and sometimes you'll make mistakes, and sometimes, you know, episodes and artworks won't be as good as you hoped they were. But you know, that's the journey, I think.
Yeah,
100%.
Which is as important.
It's definitely the a creative process, right? Like we have episodes literally where we will debrief after the episode and be like, I don't know if the flow was right on that one, bruv. I think maybe we should have did this, or maybe we should have done that. And then we're overthinking it. We're tired because we're often recording at like late in the night, and then the episode does really well, right? And then there's other situations where like, this episode is going to be amazing, and then it's like, that one doesn't do as well, right? So it is a lot of trial and error. And I think one thing that I've learned, and you know, this is down to you actually, Bhavin, because I heard your podcast with Kieran on Middle Fingers Up. Shout out to Middle Fingers Up, who we obviously also had a collaboration with.
She does awesome work.
She's great. And one of the things that you mentioned in your episode with Kieran was you shouldn't underestimate marketing. You shouldn't underestimate branding. And from the moment I heard you say that, that's been a big part of our strategy and our approach and how we're kind of you know thinking about Bruvcast, because like we discussed just before we started recording, it's not good enough just to have a podcast. You need to have a brand behind it. You need to have content behind it. You need to have your personality behind it. And this is stuff that we're literally learning as we go. Like no one has taught us any of these things, so we're just kind of like,
and it's a steep learning curve. You can't, once you start, you can't slow down. You have to just keep running.
And you'll make mistakes. And you know, I think actually I wanted to ask you about that. Like, so being a teacher, how much was like teaching kids about failure a part of your process? Because I think in like any creative field, you cannot be afraid to fail, because it is part of the process. Like if you're not failing, you're not trying. Like you have to be open to it, and you have to actually go towards failure. Is that something that you were kind of like, you know, embracing as a teacher? And is that something, and what are your like kind of thoughts about that, like in your professional life?
I'm so glad you're asking me that, because it's not something I've given much thought to for a few years now. And I miss, as I said, I miss the kids. I miss education. I don't miss the institutions, because they're all getting a bit sort of business-like these days, schools and colleges. But you know, with the creative subjects I was teaching, if you wanted the top grades, what the kids had to show is where they started, what process they went through, and then they show the final piece, let's say, the outcome. And I don't know where kids get this from, but there's this idea that everything needs to be perfect, and if you know they rub out the dodgy lines if they're drawing something, or if it's really horrible, they delete and start again. And it was so hard to drum into them that actually what the exam board wants to see is your journey. So we want to see all the horrible stuff. We want to see where you went wrong. We want to see loads of annotations so that we know what you were thinking as you were doing these things. But eventually they did get it. And so we created, all our students had websites, and the website was the journey. So, it is a huge, each project was one page. So you start at the top with the research and the ideas and the development, and it looked hideous. And then as you go through and you're scrolling, everything becomes more and more and more refined. And when the kids, when they were teenagers, but when they get that the process is as important as the final piece, that's when you've done your job. And it's quite a nice feeling, because they also see that it's fine to mess it up. It's fine to have a really bad day. It's fine to have a bad week even. But as long as you're sort of, you keep going and you don't stop because of one mistake, that's how you're going to progress. That's how you're going to develop.
It's that's
great.
That
Yeah.
That website, like you mentioned, if there's a kid who's didn't start well, and then as you scroll up and it gets, it blossoms like a beautiful flower, basically, then that's perseverance.
Yeah.
It's teaching them perseverance, through their own work, and that's like a life lesson. Because I feel in our community, failing is so negative. Like, it's such a, I don't know, like, I feel like failure is bad. You shouldn't fail, but actually now
there's shame attached to it, isn't there?
There is shame attached to it, and I feel now it's like
go
ahead. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, just today, somebody said, somebody that we met, they were like, oh, they've been made redundant. And even like that, it's like you got to keep it top secret. If somebody's been made redundant in a family, it's something that you don't talk about, as if it was that person's fault, as if they were fired for something. But I mean, even if you're fired, so what? These things happen. But it's the shame that kind of keeps people sort of fearful of talking about their honest feelings about these things.
It's crazy. 100%. It's like that. Sukese badai.
Yeah.
That's the line, isn't it?
Yeah. It's true. I think we got to get to a point where we get past that, but it's easier said than done. But I'm hopeful that our generation and the one that sort of follows us is the one to make those changes, and not in a horrible way. It's not like they don't have to give a shit about what anyone thinks, but it's like, care about what they think if they're important to you. Don't care about them because they're related to you, because I feel like family is the people that you really choose to kind of share with and to connect with, not just because there's some distant connection, your neighbor's face, kaka's, daughter's son. It's kind of like all of that is a bit old-fashioned, and it's kind of like, what good did that serve anybody apart from causing anxiety in people? So I think it's time to sort of shake that off, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. I mean, you got to go through connections and have building blocks with, you build a connection with people, right? As in now, we're all three of us have connected here, and you can really go on a journey with someone that you've connected with. Whereas just because someone's related distantly, it just feels like we're just keeping up appearances and trying to stress at the same time, like you said, building anxiety to actually keep that I don't know, that relationship, whatever it is, even if you see him once a year, and it's just like, is this real? It's fake, isn't it? At the end of the day, right? It's So,
what was that sketch in the in Goodness Gracious Me, where there was two competing families?
Oh, how big? Oh,
the Kumars.
Sinjin and Vanessa.
And that was funny at the time. I don't know if we've moved on from that much, and that show was kind of groundbreaking, but we're 20 plus years in the future, and it's still a bit like that, isn't it?
It's crazy because I mean, we talked about some of this in an episode like 2 weeks ago. We were talking about like daughter-in-laws and like, are they actually treated like daughters? And we've had so many messages about that episode, right? From people that are going through some of the things that we talked about to kind of saying things have changed and things have moved forward. So it's weird because there's almost like factions where some people and some families have adapted and have really progressed and changed some of those behaviors, and some have not. And I mean, like you're saying, it was 20 odd years ago, right? Maybe even more, maybe even longer than that. And that's, those things are still not. It's crazy because sometimes even if you go to India, things are different, and you're like, hold on, this is way more. These things have moved way more than they have in London. It's like we've kind of crystallized and preserved traditions and things,
definitely,
and we bring it back home, and then when you go to India, you're like, hold on, what's going on here? So
that's exactly how I feel about this idea of crystallizing. I really honestly believe that that's how Indian communities around the world are living. So the ones that have come out of India or through East Africa and have ended up in the UK, Australia, Canada, USA, they hold on to the culture so hard that they don't kind of, and it's kind of fossilized. It's the old culture they're holding on to. Whereas in India, they are moving on and they're kind of moving forward. And some evidence I've had of that is my work. It really doesn't resonate with Indians in India. It's kind of like, because all the phrases and like Delvaja and Darabapnu Gurche, all of that stuff is funny because these are things we've held on to for decades. And so all my sales are in the West, Australia, UK, Canada, America, and pretty much like, I don't know, I'll get one sale to India once in a blue moon. And it's kind of like, that makes complete sense because all of these quirky kind of things that you hold on to when you leave the culture, they don't need to hold on, do they? They just need to move forward, which India's doing at a rapid rate, for better and for worse. But those things are really not resonating with them. So you hit the nail on the head, I think, with that one, Raj.
There's some kako in Gujarat that has your artwork and is fondly bragging about it to his other friends. I wanted to ask you a bit more about kind of culture, right? So obviously you've kind of grown up in the UK, in London, but you also have connections and roots in East Africa, in Kenya, and then obviously in India. So what, like with your artwork and kind of like how you've approached it, what would you say is kind of like the bigger influence out of all of that? Do you feel like it's all about the combination of those three cultures? Do you feel like there's one more than another? Like, what do you personally identify as well?
I think the Gujarati element is probably the strongest in terms of the language and the Gujarati culture. And then the second layer to that would be that I'm always thinking about what it means to be an immigrant and what it means to be a mix of things. And I had a conversation with a group of people on Sunday about identity. There's something I'm a bit obsessed with. I'm always talking about this stuff. And it's like, I think we can all relate in that it's kind of sometimes hard to know where you belong because we all look like we're Indian. I'm looking at you guys now, brown skin, dark hair, we look Indian, right? But when we set foot in India, we're not Indian.
No.
We're
NRI.
NRI. We've got loads of money because we must have if we can afford to fly to India. And if we go to Kenya, we're not Kenyan or Ugandan or Tanzanian. And sometimes here in London, obviously, racism is there. It might not be overt, but it's definitely there. And I mean, London is a bit of a safe island. You leave London, you go out into the sticks, and you're going to feel it, isn't it? You walk into a dodgy pub, and you're going to be watching over your shoulder. It's just a fact, isn't it? So if we don't belong in any of those three places, then who the hell are we? And that is one reason why my wife and I talk about this sometimes, about would we live somewhere else? We've had a year in Germany one time, and that was a great experience. But like, more seriously, would we live anywhere else? And what I like about London is that it's such a melting pot, and it really is representative of the rest of the world. Like, and all the evidence of that is if you fancy eating any cuisine from any part of the world, you'll find it in London, won't you? And you won't just find it; you'll find like world-class levels of that cuisine in London. So, that's the only thing I've really. I think on my bio on the website, I think I say I'm Indian and Kenyan and all of those things, but I also say I'm a Londoner because I think that's my nearest and dearest identity at the moment. Things change, but that's how it feels.
Yeah. I think for me at least, you see it in or you hear it in the content that we produce. It's a complete it's basically Jero. It's like English, Gujarati, Swahili, South London slang, and then obviously my Patel is my Gujarati is different to mixed non-Patel. I don't know what I'm talking about. My Gujarati is different to mixed Gujarati because mixed Gujarati is Patel Gujarati, and then my Gujarati is like Kenyan Gujarati, right? Like, and it's I think Patel Gujarati is much more authentic, and it's kind of like more.
Why are you being so kind?
Straight out of it. It's Gamro, isn't it? Gamro. It's Barrio. That's what I call it. Because you say Gasso name, we say guy name, all that jazz.
And I think with the East African Gujaratis, I think when you're young, you don't even realize that most of your vocab isn't even Gujarati, it's Swahili. But because we learn languages by speaking them, not by studying them when you're young. You just take it for granted. And then it's only when you meet a Gujarati speaking person from India that some of the communication falls by the wayside because there's things that you can't understand with each other.
I don't think even if if when someone puts the phone and say hiya, okay, I don't think hiya is Gujarati, right? That's like Swahili, or maybe it's not Swahili, but it's like Kenyan Gujarati that people say hiya.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Or my mom said hiya if something's happened, or hi.
These are the bits of the language that I'm a bit in love with. These things that like for example, this mix of Swahili into Gujarati, it's only going to be relevant and sort of alive with a couple of generations, and then it dilutes as it would, and then it will just die off. So when I'm making the work, I think, well, really, I'm super proud that we all have these interesting journeys, and I think if you look at Gujarati and North Indian history, Gujaratis are known to be sort of world travelers. We're one of the groups of people that you would find in every continent, let's say. And so I'm kind of proud that we are these kind of adventurous people that go and explore and make new homes and make new lives in new places. But we sort of have a mix of the things that we find and the things that we brought with us, and that develops this new subculture. And these subcultures will only last for such a short time that I feel like it's important to grab them, document them, and almost preserve them for the next generation. And that's a lot of the phrases that I come from are quite old school phrases, and I know they're old school because when I talk to sort of my cousins' kids, and they might be in their 20s, there's not very many really young ones. Some of their phrases go over their head completely. They just don't understand it. Whereas their parents are laughing hysterically, but the kids are like, I don't understand what he's talking about. It looks nice, but I don't know what it is.
I've noticed, when my parents or my mum was born in Tanzania in Musol, and whenever she doesn't really talk about Africa as much, to be fair, but when she sees a friend of hers from back in the day who from Africa as well, and there's a connection there, and they're talking, it's just like when they talk about Africa, it's like a twinkle in their eye. You know what I mean? It brings a lot of happiness. You can see
Yeah.
it. I'm not that like Raj is more connected to the Kenyan roots probably than I've been to, you know, the African roots of my mum, to be fair, because I think it's stronger. I think in your household, Raj, because both your parents, right, have those roots, right? Am I right? You're right.
Yeah.
But when even not just my parents, but when I see someone else's parents, I've heard your dad speaking, you know, in Swahili with his friends and stuff, and it's just like it's another level, like as in the energy you get from it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, if that makes sense.
It's impressive as well.
It is. It's very impressive, you know. And like for me, looking out on, you know, looking from the outside in, it's just like, oh, okay. You can see there's so much culture and there's so much happiness in that, and the time, you know, where they experienced whatever they experienced out there when they were born there, and you know when they lived there, that you almost experience that euphoric moment, if that makes sense. Does that do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can feel it. I mean, but
Sure.
would that not be the same for like someone hearing you talk about growing up in South London, Mick?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know. I mean,
those days,
no
those days getting the bus back home late at night, drunk off your face.
The night bus.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. So one of our segments, as you may be aware, Bhavin, is share the struggle, find the funny. That's kind of what we're all about. This podcast was born out of conversations about, I mean, at its heart, mental health, but then it could be something that isn't that deep. It could be something that's a very, very annoying thing that's just pissed you off and you want to kind of talk about it, and then finding something in there which you can be like, this is funny. This is what's worth unpacking and laughing about. So,
Sure.
Yeah, wanted to ask you if you have a struggle to share.
I know because I've listened to a fair few of your episodes, so I kind of knew that we might be talking about this. I was thinking about this, and like, it's hard for me to pinpoint one that fits the brief exactly, but then there's this one story that we always tell it because it's kind of, now when you think about it, it's hilarious. At the time, it was a medical emergency. I'll explain, but that story, I think, it's funny why it resonates with me, because it's almost like we've been talking about identity and who we are and where we belong, and this story is a bit of a prime example of that. So I'll try and give you like a sort of a brief version. But we were in India, my before we were married. So Jess, or my partner, she was in India. She was working out there for a bit. I went to visit, and we thought, that was in Bangalore, so we thought we would go to Goa. So we did the whole adventurous thing, got the night train. It was amazing. We arrived in Goa at 5 a.m, and so the sun was just coming out, so nothing's open, is it? So we just sat on a beach, and the beach bar just opened, so they were bringing us breakfast. It was amazing. And you know, when you're traveling in Southeast Asia or South Asia, you can kind of wing it. So you can book stuff on the day, and you would find out. And you know, like Thailand, you don't have to plan anything, isn't it? You just turn up to places and they'll give you a room. And India, it can be like that in certain places. So that was our plan. We hadn't booked anywhere. We'd arrive in the area, get to the beach, and then we had Indian SIM cards. So we got out the phones and we started calling. She was calling, I was calling, and we thought, oh crap, maybe we should have planned this, because everyone we called was giving us really stupid rates that we weren't prepared to pay. This is like 15 years ago, where we had less money to spend on things, and probably 20 years ago now. And so we kept getting like these really stupid rates for these rooms. And this is before smartphones and stuff. So it's not like we're going to look it up and compare. And we was like, oh shit, well, what are we going to do? So I had this idea, which, thinking about it now, is obviously not very PC at all. I was like, okay, let me just, I sound too British. I sound too London for for them. So the next call I'm going to make, I'm not going to sound like that. I'm going to sound like an Indian talking English. So I did it. And I don't care to repeat what I sounded like.
Wait, hold on. Were you speaking Hindi, or were you just?
I was speaking English.
Okay, with the Indian accent.
With the Indian accent, yeah. And it worked.
Okay. Oh shit.
I called up, and I said something along the lines of, "Oh, good morning, sir. How are you? I'm very much interested in one of your rooms." Something like that. And then I got a room, and it was so dirt cheap. I was like, okay, booking it. It was a double suite, whatever. And so we finished our breakfast, and it was a 5-minute walk. We walked there, got the room, and we were knackered because all night on the train. So I thought we'd just have a little sleep. So showered, put our heads down, and then it turned into a medical emergency. And I won't tell you the whole story, but basically, Jassel, my wife's eye got so inflamed that you'd never seen anything like it. And so it became a situation where it was. It would think now it was probably an allergic reaction to what we don't really know. And when you have a severe reaction, your breathing starts to diminish, isn't
that's
it?
terrifying. So this was you were in point. You were in the hotel room.
Yeah.
And this was what, in the middle of the night? This like just all of us.
Yeah. This was in the morning, first thing in the morning. And prior to that, so I'd phoned this guy with my Indian accent. We'd gone there 5 minutes later, and so like I can't then.
And so you had to stay in character, right?
I had to stay in character, so I checked in as Indian Bhavin, and I checked in, got in the room, and I was like, okay, I can manage this for a couple of nights because we were going to move around, so it's fine.
Right. Jokes.
But then the emergency happened, and there's no emergency services number you can call, right? So I went back to reception because Jessa's eyes were like swelling, her breathing was restricting, and at the time we had a doctor friend who I called in London, and he said he asked me what was going on, and he said, "Get to the hospital now." God. And when he said that, I was like, shit. Okay. So I kind of put the phone down, and Jess was saying, What did he say? I was like, no, it's fine, nothing. I'll be back in a minute, thinking I need to arrange an ambulance or something. So where it all broke down is I ran to the reception, got my character, started talking to him like I'm an East Londoner, and that's how I talk, because I was born in Kenya, but I was brought up in East London, and this is how I talk. And so he's looking at me like, what happened to your voice? And I was thinking, oh shit, it's too late to undo this now. But anyway, he sorted me out a rickshaw, we got to the hospital, got sorted, it was all fine. But when we came back to the hotel afterwards, they were very confused about who I was and what I was saying. And it kind of it made us, at the time, because it was a bit of a scary experience, but it all ended well. But now when we think back, it's funny in that for a minute I got what I wanted because I pretended to be somebody I wasn't. But when something real went down, the real me really confused the situation, and they thought, who is this guy? So yeah, that was the struggle. But thinking back to it now,
did they change your rate because of your?
No, but you know what? We checked out that the next day because it was like, we don't know what caused this allergic reaction. She had a thing about cats at the time, so and there's cats roaming around everywhere in Goa, so it could have been something to do with that. But, yeah, we left pretty sharpish the next day.
This sounds like something Mirage would do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it works. And that we go back to India a lot, and what I find now is that, because I don't know where I know my Hindi, but I can speak a fair bit of Hindi, and I think I must have just absorbed it from my older sister watching Bollywood when we were growing up. But I didn't actively watch that much Bollywood myself. And so when we go to India now, and the last time we went in a group of 4, but I had the best Hindi, so I was in charge of stopping the rickshaws, because as we all know, if you sound like an Indian, then you're going to get a better rate than if you sound like an NRI Indian. So it's interesting how
so when you go back to India, does Indian Bhavin come back out again, or is he in return? No,
I don't do that, because I'm like, I wouldn't do that now, because it's a bit of a piss take, isn't it? But I'm really trying hard with my Hindi, especially if we're in Mumbai or something. Then I try hard with the Hindi, and then when I forget words, it turns into Gujarati, which is no good. Although Mumbai is full of
That's what happened with my mate Ash when we were backpacking in India. His dada lives in Gujarat, right? So we went to see his dada afterwards, and before that, we were all obviously we were going through Bombay, Goa, Kerala, Delhi, Varanasi, basically all of India, right? Backpacking. By the time we got to Gujarat, Ash's language was all muddled up. So he was trying to hold a conversation, and he doesn't speak a lot of Gujarati anyway, right? So when he was trying to talk to his dada, it was like Hindi, Gujarati. It was like, and his dada was like confused, like he was like possessed or something.
Oh, bless him.
And then after we left Gujarat, Ash got confused with Gujarati and was speaking Gujarati when we were in like Hindi speaking areas. So definitely something that happens for sure.
Yeah.
Mick, did you have any questions on your side?
I did actually. I was going to ask, going back to your teaching. Obviously, you're tapping into a lot of minds of your students, right? I don't know how many you had in the class, but when you're teaching, how do you tap each person's an individual? They think differently. They have different mindsets. How did you tap into each of them to make get them to where they need to be at the end of the year?
So I was lucky enough to end up in a team which had a really strong ethos, and the ethos was that regardless of the subject. So I've taught art and design, I've taught creative media production, photography, animation, all sorts of things. But regardless of the subject, what we were really teaching them is to become independent thinkers, because what we figured as a team is that whatever life throws at you and whatever job you end up in and whatever career you might want to pursue, the key difference between you being a follower or a leader or somebody who's going to grow and develop, or somebody who's just going to be comfortable, is your ability to think critically and kind of independently. And what we mean by sort of the independence there is not following the crowd and not just doing things because somebody in authority tells you this is the way it's done, or even if your parent says, no, this is the way it's done. The ability to sort of question things and to unpick things and then make your own mind up about what you want to do. So that was the key sort of learning that we wanted to give every single student, regardless of what subject they're on. And so the way we did it is, like, for example, if we were doing a photography project, it wouldn't just be an empty project, as in go and photograph some buildings and some landscapes and do some fashion photography. It'd be much more like, okay, let's pick a theme. Let's think about, I don't know, people whose second language is English, not their first language, in East London, in that bit of Stratford and Plaistow where we were. Go and interview these people, get a quote from them, and then tell their story through taking a portrait of them. And so by putting them out of their comfort zones and making them interact with the real world, the hope was that they would grow in confidence. And the photography is the photography, and let's be honest, like, we live in a time where you don't have to go to college or uni or do anything, and like, if you want to learn something technical, what are you going to do? You're just going to go on YouTube and search it up, and the answers are there, aren't they? So the kind of creative skills are important, but they're not that important, because those are things that with practice anybody can develop and get good at. But what sets you apart is if you can think creatively and critically, rather, but also if you know something about the world. And I think we used to refer to that as the cultural capital. If we educate them about the world that they live in, then they are better equipped to live in that world rather than living in their own bubble. And I feel like when people don't have that experience, they stop growing. Like I don't know if you can relate to this, but I feel like not so much these days, but especially when I was at uni and stuff, you get it seems to affect boys more than girls, but you kind of get these men who they're exactly the same at the age of 40 as they were when they were 18. It's like they hit 18, they figured out what they wanted to do. They wanted to own a BMW, M Sport, and buy a house with a drive. They've done that. They've achieved their life goals, and then that's it. They stop. They don't develop. So there's no further challenges or no questioning their own systems or beliefs. And so for us, that was the key thing, to make sure that each kid left with the ability to question things, the ability to sort of think things through thoroughly, and not to assume that anybody was right or wrong, but try and work it out for themselves.
Yeah, makes sense.
Damn,
That's beautiful.
that is really powerful.
Deep.
Yeah.
Life skills as well, like proper life skills.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I feel like now that I'm a new dad, I feel like that's exactly the sort of approach I would still take. And even as far as like, my daughter's very tiny, but even when she's big, I want her to be able to question us and what we're doing and the decisions we're making, because she should have the autonomy to say, well, maybe your way isn't the right way for me, and maybe we can try something else. And the kind of the basis of it is for us as a little family unit is that we try and approach everything with a really simple idea of kindness. So is your action or your thought or what you've just done or how you've treated someone, was it kind or was it unkind? And normally it's kind of easy to decide which category it falls into. And we feel like if you're mainly being kind most of the time, you're winning. And if you've had some times where you haven't been kind, you've been unkind, then there's work to be done in those areas. But that's the kind of approach we have
definitely. It's
to take.
like giving them a voice, giving them a say.
Yeah, I feel like
For sure.
that's with our podcast as well, right? Like a lot of the topics that we cover is exactly us questioning why we do things or why we have done things in our community. And I think our generation was probably the first generation to actually even ask those questions. Like if I speak to my mom about like there's certain traditions and certain things, my mom or my dad, if you ask them why do you do this way,
you never ask why.
no one knows.
Never
they have no
knows
idea.
why,
They have absolutely no idea. And then they're like, we didn't ask. Whereas we want to know every damn reason, like specifics, like details, because we're going to question it. And I think it's a function of the education system, right? I think that it's something. I don't think it was as explicit as it sounds like you were taking it when you were a teacher. I think a lot of that was implicit, and it was just something that we kind of like inferred from your upbringing. But for sure, I completely like that. That really resonates, at least with me, of not just taking the status quo. Like if you follow everything and everyone, you never question it in any matter of your life, whether that's your personal life or your professional life, it's not gonna. I think that's not where you can really have the most like fun. Like there needs to be some friction for some fun, right? There needs to be something that you're opposing, whether it's cultural norms, whether it's something else. Like that is where the magic is. That, I mean, there's tension there, and it's not necessarily easy to do those things. But I mean, come on, we're not here to have easy lives. We're here to have eventful, experiential lives, right? And that's what we want. So as you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, this is really like, yeah, it kind of resonates as to all the things that I like, what I believe in, the values that I have, and what I'd want to instill onto my kids.
I think that takes me back to being, when you're at college and you're applying for uni, right? So, and back in those days, didn't we all like go to 10 weddings every summer because there was
in a school
weddings and
in
the
a school
weddings
hall.
were huge. So yeah, always in a school hall, and then you're hoping there's a basketball somewhere because the hoops hang in there, isn't it? But there never was a basketball. But when I did my A levels, I did a couple of creative subjects, I did psychology as well, and then I was like, I'm gonna do art at uni, and a couple of like older relatives who thought they were doing a good thing tried to talk me out of it and said, why you're academic, you can do things, you've got good GCSEs, why don't you do something academic and do art on the side, like a side thing. And it used to really piss me off and upset me actually as a young man, and thinking, well, that's because I don't want to do those academic things, and I want to follow sort of my passions a bit. And so the funniest was at the wedding is I started. I went to uni. I did a course called Mixed Media Fine Art, and so I'll just introduce it as fine art because it's too much of a mouthful. So then the following summer, you'd go to weddings, and you'll see those masses that typical conversation. Oh, kiklo moto tegyo, suka gyo, katana, all of that stuff. Like okay, and then they would ask, "Tusu banech," and I was like, what are you doing at uni? And I was like, fine art. And then it would be like radio silence. It's like you can hear the tumbleweed because it's like it's not on their radar, and they've got no understanding of what you've just said. And for me, it was a bit of a blessing because it meant that those awkward questions just stopped. But I think I'm honestly, like, even in the extended family, there must have been people thinking, and people still think like that today, like, what the hell is he going to do with a fine art degree? How is he going to get a job? How is he going to get a house? But then that there comes with an assumption that I want the same life as you want for your sons and daughters.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm all right without a BMW M3. I'm made peace with that. And you people want different things, but this immigrant journey initially is very copy and paste. We need to get a decent job. We need a house. We want to clear the mortgage in 25 years. We'll go to India once a year or Kenya. And, all those standard things that people were fulfilling for 20 plus years. What's lovely to see now is that I have, in the extended family, younger ones that are kind of like doing things that their parents wouldn't have dreamed of doing, like moving in with their partners before getting married, or buying property without even having a prospect of a relationship, which is great because that's all perfectly normal growing up, isn't it? So it's kind of nice to see that that's the way things are going.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's great to see the.
And that's where the name comes from, by the way, ŞU CHÉ.
Oh, really? So that's what. Wow. Okay, so
nice.
Nice.
Yeah. ŞU CHÉ, art nu ŞU CHÉ, but it's too suka. And I was like, relax.
The way you just said that, just like.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think there's a delay, guys, on my side, so apologies. I don't know why there's a delay, but I was going to say the way Bhavin just said that as well. It's those questions in that format, in that order. Those those three things that you just said. So yeah, it just resonated with me. Go on, sorry, Raj, I interrupted.
Yeah, and they were delivered very bluntly.
Oh no, there's no sensitivity. What are you gonna do like the sukai? The sukai thing is like bam, body shaming, and then it's like, what are you doing now? Bam, okay, fine, education shaming, and then it's like, well, have you found a woman? Okay, fine, damn, that's now another one. Like, it's literally like hit you. And
definitely,
I think it's weird because it wasn't coming from a malicious place. It was just coming from a confusion as to like, well, hold on, you're not fitting this mold, and questioning like why there was an anomaly going on there. And I don't think there was any malice in it. And I don't think even like the question of like, well, have you found someone, or when you get married? I mean, maybe in some pockets that there is, but I think generally, because it's so common, I think it's more about, okay, well, this doesn't fit the pattern that I have of what I think you should be doing, so I'm going to question it, right? And it doesn't make it okay at all. But I think it is worth just kind of understanding and having empathy, right? Like, you know, I think one of the things that you were saying, Bhavin, about just questioning things, everything begins with dialogue, right? Like some of the conversations that we're having, some of the topics that we talk about are, you know, there's going to be differing opinions on them, and that's okay. Like it's okay to disagree. It's okay to kind of not be on the same page about everything all the time, because if we did that, we would live mundane, boring lives. It's okay to have arguments with your partner, right? Sometimes you have too many, right? But it's okay, right? Because you're figuring things out. And I feel like sometimes there's this like almost expectation of perfectionism, and I don't actually know how much of it is our culture, like the immigrant experience, or it's something else. Because even with this podcast, like when I'm like talking about it to friends, or we're kind of getting messages, a lot of the messages, like this is basically my life. Like the things that you're talking about, the kinds of things that happen to you are just so relatable. And I mean, that was the intention. That has always been the intention, just to kind of make people feel less isolated about little struggles that they might have. So I just wanted to kind of say that totally resonated.
It's amazing. I think you guys are doing a grand job in creating a space that is really underrepresented, and you know, the South Asian experience, the Indian experience, the Gujarati experience, they're all unique things. And what happens in the mainstream is we're all lumped together. So, you know, when Hollywood talks about representation of ethnic minorities, they say South Asian, and they mean so many different groups of people. And these groups of people don't even speak the same language or eat the same food. So why are we being clumped together just because it's easy for them, right? So no, it's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I think
thank you, man.
it opens up. It kind of eases, because it's obviously there's a lot of comedy and there's a lot to laugh at, and that makes people comfortable to kind of come on and talk and share.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Hey,
Mate, go ahead.
Sorry, guys. No, I was going to say, you know what? It's important.
It's like you're dialing in from India, bro.
Hey, look, this is Nikhil from India. Okay, yeah. No, but,
my mum still goes louder.
Oh yeah, you have to shout. I'm right there. I'm right there.
Yeah, no, I don't do that to Bhavin's ears. Yeah. You know what? I think it's important to, especially the next generation of, you know, our kids, etc., to tell them, it's like you said, Bhavin, it's okay if you don't have that BMW M3. You know, as long as you're happy, you know, in what you're doing, that is the most important thing. Because I'm telling you, you know, when I was growing up, and this is just culture, because my parents went through the same thing. They were like, well, if you don't study, or if you don't know your maths, you know, you're not going to be able to do certain things. You're not going to be able to do this, and it doesn't come from a place of maliciousness. It comes from a place of love, because at the same time they want you to succeed, but they don't realize the detriment of the fear that they're putting into you at the same time. Because I'll give you an example. You know, my parents had a shop, standard thing, right, for Indian, good for Patels, right, at the end of the day. And you know, if you don't study, if you don't know how to do something, then they would say dukan uboreje, right, basically, right? And that was like, wow, that made the shop
as a threat,
and it made the shop a negative thing for me. So I was like, you know, so whenever my dad asked me to stand in the shop, it was like, oh, drag myself. You know, there's so many learnings you can take from standing in a shop, right? There's so many things you can learn about business, you can learn about customer service, so many things, but none of those things. I didn't absorb any of those things. One thing I did absorb was, I don't want to be here because this is not my future. But at the same time, as I grow older, you know, a few of my friends who who got degrees, etc., realized they didn't want to work in that 9 to 5, and they were like, no, I'm going to buy a shop. And I'm sure between all three of us, we know people who do that. And there's no, at the end of the day, actually, they're pretty happy. They're their own boss. They get to do whatever they need to do, and they're providing for their families. And now, so I always tell my girls, and I think a lot of the parents from our generation now will tell their kids, it's okay. The most important thing is that you're doing something that you're content with, you're happy with. It doesn't have to always end in pound signs, etc., right? As long as you're content and your mind is at ease, and your journey, you're on your journey, and you're consistent with it, and you're going to see it through at the end of the day, and you're doing something you love. But yeah.
No, for sure. And what you said about pound signs, I think for a good number of decades, success was attributed to, the measure of success was money, wasn't it? And I think now we have a different idea of what success means. Success can mean good mental health. Success can mean a healthy relationship. Success can mean 3 holidays a year in a caravan, But if we stop simplifying what it means to be happy and what it means to be successful, then you can really achieve those things, those happiness goals. Because if you think it's about money, then, I was thinking about this recently, in that there's loads of people, obviously, who do the traditional careers and the routes, and it's great, and they're earning loads, and probably triple, quadruple my salary. But would I swap lives with them? And what made me think about this recently is that I've just had 3 months at home, spending every single day with my daughter, and you could not pay me any amount of money to sort of give that up, because I feel like I'm really, really time rich. I'm my own boss. I can work whenever I want to. And if she needs me, or if as a family we want to do something, I don't have to check in with anybody. I can just go and do that. And it's taken me a while to almost realize how rich I am in that sense, not sort of in terms of monetary value. Actually, people kill themselves working so they can earn money, so then they can have a break from working and go on holiday. And one of my best friends, she said something to me a long time ago. It's really stuck with me. Because I said I like sort of interiors and design and stuff like that, and so does she. And one of the things she said is that she always has the idea of make your home your holiday, and the idea being that make your home somewhere where when you walk in, it brings you so much joy and the same relaxation as sitting in a 5-star hotel, that you enjoy your home every single day. And I kind of live by that, and I'll happily spend loads of money doing up our house, but I'm all right with staying in a Airbnb rather than 5-star all the time. And we mix it up, obviously, like most people do, but it's that stuff, having sort of the best of everything isn't something that makes me happy. It's kind of the roughing it, exploring, going down the wrong way, and kind of discovery is the thing that brings you joy, I think.
That makes do you know what? I think that definitely resonates with Raj more than me, probably. But at the same time, I think I'm heading in that.
You sound like a traveler.
He is. He loves that kind of stuff, and I think that's why me and him are not polar opposites. We've got a lot of similarities, but then we've also got our opposite side of things as well. But I'm now feel like I'm, since having kids, and my wife's a bit more of an explorer than I am, and now I feel like that is the way to go. Stumbling upon things, chancing things, whereas before it was like, okay, no. You want the perfect edge, or crisp lines. Anything I do is like, it's got to be perfection. But actually, no. I'm starting to learn now. Close to 40, basically. You know what? Not everything has to be perfect. There are rough edges are okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have rough edges, etc. But I think that all derives from our culture and what we grew up through, basically. And it was, and I say grew up through lightly in terms of it wasn't all bad. Yeah, it was. It's a journey.
Yeah. And we get it, don't we? Because they work so hard that every penny was accounted for. So then, this thing we joke about covering everything in plastic, and I've got a piece of artwork which is a remote control covered in plastic. But that artwork has got no words with it, but people get it without me saying a word, because every immigrant, whether you're Indian or not, or Mexican or wherever you're from, you understand this idea of putting a lot of value on something, because to buy a TV in the 70s and 80s was probably quite a few months of saving, and then really thinking, do we need a TV, or should we stick with the black and white one without the remote? And then when people eventually got those things, there was this real sort of want to protect those things. And that's why, we all know people who still got plastic covered chairs and things, but and it's funny, but you kind of get where that mentality
for sure. We you know what? The first TV that we bought brand new was when I was I think I'd just finished college and I was going into uni. Every single TV before that was secondhand. There was a shop that used to sell. There was this dude, Indian dude, right? I don't know. Let's call him rubbish, right? All he would do was sell TVs, and he would also repair broken TVs and then resell them. And he just had this tiny shop, and this had loads and loads of TVs. And you'd go to his shop where your remote controls, because the remote controls didn't last then, right? They had this lifespan of maybe it'll last 2 or 3 years, and then you have to start banging it or shaking it to change the channel. So I remember going to his shop a bunch of times, and he'd do some weird thing with the remote control, take out circuit board, solder it, take out the circuit board or whatever, and just make it last, right? And I think that was one of the things that I feel like is ingrained, right? You're trying not to waste things, and you want to kind of preserve and get the longevity out of all of the things, which nowadays the tech it's not built to last, man. The TVs start, I think they're almost programmed to start to fail after 10 years.
Yeah, they can't handle the software updates, and that what you've just said isn't it fully true of our food as well? Nothing is in the bin. Yeah. Whatever's left over turns into a new dish the next day.
Rotli.
Exactly. I was just thinking bagari rotli. Yeah, I quite fancy them, but we haven't got any rotli. So.
Do you know what? That's right. That's why there's so much. But sorry about the delay.
Go.
I was going to say there's so much fuss about. This is why there's so much fuss about. When food goes off, because a lot of food goes off in our house, and my wife, or if my mum sees, job bagari. When you empty out the fridge and there's so much food going to waste. I think there's more. It's amplified to another level in an Indian household than probably, I don't know, than if it is in another culture. But it just feels that way. It just turns in. It does morph into something else, bagari khichdi, or bagari khichdi or bagari bhat or whatever it is.
And bhat.
Yeah.
Bhat khichdi. Yeah. Isn't that dhokri is the same thing, right? Dhokri is. Or is that made from old tepla? It is, right?
Well, you are.
Yeah. Oh, that's from scratch.
That's from scratch, isn't it?
Oh, okay, okay. I'm getting education.
Why you been throwing that away too?
I wanted to ask you, Bhavin, about your favorite piece. I mean, you've got some amazing pieces of work. I think the first exposure that I had to your work was my sister I think my sister forwarded me something. It was the Darubhap Nogar chair. And she was like, look at this. My sister actually, she studied art. She's also a teacher. So she's kind of in that kind of field. And she bought the print and she's put it in the toilet. So it's kind of and her whole mindset is if you're going to do what you're going to do, remember, it's not your bab's house.
Exactly. Clean up after yourself.
But I just think that it's so layered, and I feel with art, every piece of work will have a story, right, and will have multiple layers to it, and
Yeah.
and I think that that's definitely true of what you produce. Do you have like a hands down favorite piece, or a piece that kind of brings you the most joy? You're like, okay, this is the one that's like I'm really proud of, or the one that kind of like connects with you.
There's too many, but like when you're an artist, when you make something and you're actually happy with it, which I don't put out stuff if I'm not happy with it, because there's the artwork you'll never see because it's a piece of crap. And it's true of all artists. We make a lot of stuff and you see a fraction of it. So then they become like your babies. You become very precious and protective about it. But there's like, I have loads of artworks that sell again and again and again as prints, and there's a few that only sell a handful of times, but when they sell, I'm like, yes, because that piece might mean something to me. So there's a couple I'd mention if that's all right. But there's this one with Biggie on it, Notorious B.I.G., and it's a play on some of his lyrics, and the lyrics from the song Juicy, I think it is. It's all good, baby, baby. And on my one, it says it's all good.
Yeah, I've
baby,
seen that
baby.
one. That one's good. Yeah.
It's good, right? It's think they own the world, isn't it? And the reason for that is, I was born in 1980, and so I did most of my formative growing up in the 80s and 90s. And in that time in London, we, as South Asians, we didn't have a strong sense of identity and culture. What I mean by that is popular culture. We had Bhangra, and West London, embraced that, and Southall and places. But if you weren't in that scene, there wasn't much else. So what tended to happen, and this is just in my experience with my friends and families, is that the culture that we aligned ourselves with was black culture, black music, black fashion, black actors, and anytime, like right now we're rewatching.
Oh yeah, it's so good. I did the same thing. Yeah.
It's good, isn't it? When the baby's up for night feeds, that's our show. We're watching the. And I remember, and this is probably true of every family, even if, when Indians came on TV, the whole world stopped, isn't it? Everyone ran to the TV. But before that started to happen, if there was a black family on TV or a black program, you would still stop, because you feel like, all right, I can relate, because these are different people. We're different people. They're on TV. Let's watch them. We can understand what. And Desmond's is so relatable for any. And so, what was the point I was making? So I remember that we were all aligning with this culture, which wasn't ours, but we really made it ours. And I mean, it's hard to meet an Indian who doesn't like black music in some form, whether it be hip hop or R&B or blues or jazz. There's something that you're going to connect to. And I remember, for me, it was always hip hop. I'm a big hip hop fan, and so that idea, I don't kind of know where it came from, but I think it's probably come from when you're just home alone and you say stupid things between you and your partner that nobody else would hear. I think I was probably saying it's all good, baby, baby. Nice. And then that's kind of where the idea came. So I love it when people buy that one. And then the other one is and it's a Evian shaped bottle, and the liquid in there should be clear, right? But it's kind of a yellowy color, and the words on it are Besap Pani, which
so good
for anyone that doesn't understand what that means. Besap means piss or urine, and Pani means water. And you would only understand that phrase if you're a particular Indian from a particular place. And for people that don't get it, it's kind of the phrase you say, isn't it? When you're stopping at a service station on a long motorway drive. All right, we've got 10 minutes, ciao, pesapani, and then be back. And so everyone knows what it means, but if you break down the words, it sounds like a nonsense thing. And so I thought, well, let's put that on an Evian bottle, and I should stop saying Evian because they might come at me, because Chanel number 5 did come out.
Oh, really?
For one of my other works. I had to,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I had to tweak it. That's another story. But they told me to take it down because apparently the Chanel.
Oh, the bottle. Yeah, the bottle has a
is
trademark. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although you can buy that bottle on any crappy artwork if you look for 2 seconds on the internet. But anyway, I took it down. But so I think when people buy those really niche ones, that makes me happy because I feel like, oh, you get me. You're seeing things as I'm seeing those things, and I'm not having to sell it or describe it or whatnot. And it's great to sell the bestsellers, and then there's about 15, 20 bestsellers. But when these niche ones sell, that makes my day a bit.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Fair play. I had a question for you actually, Bhavin, and me and Raj don't know how this feels, unless we ever quit our day jobs and do this full time, right? But how does it feel doing something you love,
Right.
like when you wake up in the morning, for a living?
I mean, it's not like all rosy because initially, I was in that first year and a half, I was churning out art like a machine. I was making new art all the time, and although that has had to slow down because like you're making the art, but then you become a business owner. So then there's a website to maintain, there's marketing material to make, there's an email list to curate and send out. There's logistics and getting the right paper and the right printer and all of those things. And at each stage, I've kind of upgraded because I want people to buy the stuff because they relate to it and they like it. But I'm not here to make a quick profit. I almost feel like what I'd love is if every Gujarati household, for example, had one of my artworks, because then it means that I've done some meaningful work in my life that will outlast me. That is how it is, and I can't complain because how many people are in my position in that they create something, and that something that they create allows them to put food on the table. Not many people have that, and I feel really sort of lucky and blessed. So in that sense, I wake up every day thinking, bloody, I'm so lucky. And sometimes what I do, and I go for an early walk sometimes if the weather's nice. And when we moved into this house, we thought, let's move, make sure we're near a central line station, we can get to work easy, all of that stuff. And we moved in the December, and then our whole lives changed in the January because my wife decided to quit her job and go freelance. And I thought, actually, if she's doing it, I'm going to do that as well. So I kind of had it in my mind, I'll give it 6 more months and then I'll wind down and stop. And now we don't need the station, but what I do is I walk around the town, walk past the station, and I can't lie, when I'm seeing people walking towards the station and I'm walking away from the station going home, that's a nice feeling. Nice. Yeah, to be able to know that you're in charge of your day and what you're going to do and how you're going to fill the day, and it's great. But I also struggle a little bit in that when you're a teacher, you're so institutionalized. Somebody's they may as well tell you when to go to the toilet because they tell you what room to be in, what subject, what time, which group, what coursework. And that's all mapped out for you for the whole year, and all you've got to do is your bit in the lessons. And so you go from something that's hyper structured to now there's no structure, and so the teacher in me kind of lives on. So I'm sitting in my little studio at home now and looking at my whiteboard, which I installed because I thought, well, I need something to like remind me daily to-do list, have a schedule. So I try and kind of discipline myself and schedule myself. But what needs to happen next for me is also carving out proper dedicated time for the creativity. But the thing about the creativity is you can't do it on cue. I can't think, Tuesday morning, 10 to midday, I'm going to draw, because if I don't feel like it, I just won't do it. So really, what I do is I keep my iPad close and sketchbooks close, and I draw whenever I get some inspiration. And sometimes that takes me into the middle of the night, but that's kind of a nice time to be creative.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect
Yeah,
sense,
that's-
because there's days where,
Yeah.
you know what? There's days where, and I'll be honest, like I'm dragging myself to record because it's late at night, and you could have had an argument with your partner, or you might have had a crap, shit day, and then you're dragging it. But then there's other days where,
Yeah.
it's like you've gone for a walk and you've got a fresh mind, so you're just thinking about, where I'm thinking about things on the pod, but I can't just pick up the phone and say to Raj, "Oh, let's go and record now." Does that make sense? So it's like,
Yeah.
so I can resonate with you from that perspective.
You have to park
Exactly.
the idea and
We
come
put it in the
back to it.
notes and then we save it for next time, and hopefully
Yeah.
it lands the same way. But it's just one of those things where, it depends how you feel
Yeah.
inside, and how your the energy is, etc.
For sure. And I think with anything creative, it's all about practice, isn't it? I mean, people can have talent, but if you don't practice, you don't hone your craft, and you don't get better, and you don't challenge yourself, and then I think your audience will notice, your audience and my audience, if we get lazy and if we just churn out half-hearted material,
yeah,
people will feel that, and then that would kind of be the beginning of the end. So I'm always conscious of, sometimes like one piece of art, in total, if I sat down and did it, it could take me 3 or 4 days. But sometimes that's 3 or 4
Wow.
months in the making, because I've gone back to it 20 times because I'm not happy with the color or the font or the layout. I mean, I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to those things. And I love typography, so that's always the thing that kind of, I'll print it, I'll hang it on the wall, I'll look at it for a couple of days, and I'm like, maybe that needs a bit of a tweak. And so when you see it, when I put it on Instagram or I put it on the website, you're really seeing the product at the end of a long journey. And that's the bit I think I probably need to share a bit more of online and on socials, because I think some people, I think that, well, a lot of people don't even know that it's me behind the work. They think it's some group of people that are churning out all of this artwork. So it's probably time that I started telling.
Yeah, man, you need to claim it.
Yeah.
You need to claim the work, because it's phenomenal and it's amazing, and it's
Thank you.
It makes people feel like they're a part of something. Honestly, like the best up by anything, right? That's something that we heard all the time. We still hear from, like, from family, right? And it makes you feel like, oh, okay, there's other people for which this is just a standard saying and a standard thing that that goes on. And connection's important. It's super important. And
for sure. We can't go into IKEA and buy a print that represents us, can we? We can get an Eiffel Tower or Sydney Harbour Bridge, but what's that got to do with anything? And so that's the main motivator, is to sort of give people. I want people to be seen in my work. I want them, their language, their thoughts, their beliefs, and even sort of to the extent of sort of spiritual and religious beliefs. I want people to feel like, oh yeah, so there's somebody who's making stuff that talks to me specifically, that I can put in my house and enjoy. Like lots of, I live in East London and surrounded by like artist studios and galleries and things, and it's a bit of an exclusive white man middle class club, in that if you don't belong to that demographic, it's always a bit of a struggle to try and crack that nut in terms of getting an exhibition or a studio space or things like that, because we're not, I'm not mainstream. I appeal to a very niche audience, and I wouldn't want to be mainstream. But and on the very things that are quite questionable in terms of quality of art. A basic print might be starting at 75, and I made a conscious decision that I wouldn't be greedy in terms of pricing, and that I would offer smaller prints so that there was an accessible entry point for my stuff. And I don't know how long I can sustain the smaller prints as a business, because it has to run as a business. But the intention is that it would make me very happy if somebody could afford even a smaller print if they wanted it, and if it brought them some joy. And if I doubled my prices, that's not going to happen. So I wouldn't get the same feeling. I wouldn't get the same reviews or interactions or lovely DMs and messages that I get regularly. So that was always the plan behind sort of the pricing and the structure of the business.
Yeah, it's so cool to like understand what's going on under the hood of ЩU CHE Art. So yeah, thank you so much for being so open and just talking about all of the background and everything. Mick, do you have any final questions?
No, I've definitely learned a lot as well, because you've been so detailed and very open, like Lara said, really open with your answers as well, and it just gives us a bit of insight, and the listeners as well, insight of how your mind works, and like Rod said, underneath the hood of ЩU CHE Art, and what goes into it on a daily basis, and what you've created is amazing, truly amazing.
No, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk. I mean, I'm not here to sort of self-promote, because we talked about loads of interesting things, but it's always nice, I think, for any creator, when someone stops to ask you about what you do. What's great about that is it makes you sort of think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you started and why it's still important. So it's motivating for me as well to just go through things again, and it's a bit of a kick up the bum. I might be more productive tomorrow.
Nice.
Let's see what happens tomorrow.
For the listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find your stuff? We'll obviously put links in the bio for this episode. But yeah, this is your moment to kind of like plug anything.
So if you Google ЩU CHE Art, which is SUCHE and then the word art, you'll find me pretty easily. So on Instagram, it's @ЩU CHE Art. The website is ЩuCHEArt.com, and also, if you Google my name, it'll probably come up as well. I think I haven't done that in a while, but maybe it will. But you'll find me there, and there's ways to get in touch if you want to chat, or if you want to ask about the artwork, or if you have any queries. There's a WhatsApp number there and an email. So one of the things I pride myself on is being really available to people that want to talk to me, and that's why it's not my personal number; it's a business number, but my number's on there. If people want to send me a message and ask questions about the work, or if they've got anything they want clarity on.
Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bhavin. It was awesome.
Thank you, Bhavin.
It was great to have this conversation.
I look forward to
for sure. Absolutely. And for Mick still dialing in from India, because you're working, bruv, I don't know what is going on in India. We need to get this fixed for the next episode, bro. For the listeners, we'll put all the links in the description. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode and just kind of got to understand more about the amazing work that Bhavin produces, and a bit more of the story behind the pieces. Please be sure to check it out if you haven't already. And we will see you next week, and same time, same place. So share the struggle, find the funny, and see you later, people. Bye.
Take care, guys.
See ya.